Okay, welcome to your Communizer Radio Hour. We are here today on this glorious 28th of March 2021 to break off another edition of the Endnotes Journal.
Mm,
We are up
Squeezing
to
out another loaf.
Endnotes number 5. I'm showing it to the screen. None of you can see it,
Mm,
but
this will not be in the actual upload. There's no video feed.
it's here. I'm holding it in my hand. It's called The Passions and the Interests. It's a beautiful book, folks. It's really quite nice. I contributed to the Kickstarter, so I take full credit for these. Every essay starts with like a black page, so
Mm.
I take credit for
They
that.
spent all the extra
There's
money they made on ink to
yeah on
print
ink.
out these like completely black pages.
Yeah, there's some yellow pages. There's this whole section in it that all the pages are yellow, so I'll take credit for that. They like redesigned, or I guess they have a new font, so I'll take credit for that. Fonts are quite expensive. They redesigned
Mm-hmm.
the layout, so now the main text of the essays is like a full body, and it kind of like wraps around the titular endnotes. So I'll take credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they had to buy a lot of books and whatnot, so I'll take credit for those as well. Yeah, I'll take credit for all of it.
They should
And
really put your name on it.
there are a lot of people in the colophon. A lot of people that
What's a
I recognize there.
colophon?
Colophon, it's kind of like a masthead, but let me just look it up.
So is that like a column
Finishing stroke, an inscripted
finishing
monogram or
stroke?
cipher containing the place and date of publication, printer's name, etc., formerly placed on the last page of a book.
Oh, so it's kind of like a, is it kind of like an acknowledgements page, but at the end of the book?
Yeah, it's an acknowledgements page with printer and whatnot. They say thanks to Kieran Aarons, Lucy Alford, Kyla Arsadjaja, Max Esri Bartko, Martin Bjork, Hunter Bolin,
Bjork?
Mikkel Bolt Rasmussen, Zasha Buzari, Jasper Burns, Josephine Barry, Jacob Blumenfeld, Ray Brazier, Peter Carlson, Murray Davidson, James Day, Cooper Francis, the Friends of the Classless Society, Jonathan Harvey, Amanda Jarrett, Karsten Joule, Shyam Khanna, Ray Knoll, Emmy O'Brien, Chris O'Kane, Idris Robinson, Stephen Rodriguez, Pavlos Rufos, Gabriela Salvidea, Howard Slater, Ida Simonson, Daniel Spalding, Kailash Srinivasan, Marina Vishmit, and Chloe Watlington.
Damn.
How many of those names do you recognize?
I guess Jasper Burns and Ray Brazier.
Yeah,
And like the other ones kind of subliminally ring a bell, some of them, but I don't know if that's just because like they've also been in other volumes of Endnotes in like the credits page.
I've read. I have Josephine Barry's book, Art and Bare Life. I've read like maybe
Oh,
half of
right.
it.
Yeah.
She's a really good thinker. I'm interested to know what her contribution is here. Shyam Khanna is the guy who brought down Jasper's magazine, uh, Commune.
Interesting. So they both,
He's
they
the
both
canceled guy.
like, oh, he got, okay. I thought maybe you meant like the person who canceled
He's the one who got
the
canceled, and
magazine.
apparently,
Okay.
through Commune's like inadequate responses to his cancellation, that is what kind of like precipitated their downfall.
Mm.
Daniel Spalding, I recognize somehow. Jacob
Yeah,
Blumenfeld,
I know his like sports equipment company.
that's fucking hilarious. Jacob Blumenfeld, pretty sure I follow him on Twitter. We had like a conversation about him coming on the show to discuss their newest piece that they publish, Onward Barbarians or whatever, but I have not made time to read it yet.
Onward Barbarians, interesting, because usually archetypically barbarians are associated with like reactionary neo-pagans and like right wing might makes right mentality. So I'd be interested to see someone like reclaiming the barbarian archetype
Well,
for
it's probably a
different
reference to the
audiences.
socialism or barbarism phrase
Oh,
from Miss Rosa Luxemburg. Okay, so what are we
okay.
doing here?
I have one of. All right.
let's
Um,
let's let's get
we're
focused. I know you have
discussing
one of our books
the
somewhere.
Endnotes editorial that
The
I've
Endnotes
actually
editorial.
read,
Yeah, that
that I
you.
have totally read,
Yes,
that
you've
I have
totally read.
like read because I am a diligent reader of Endnotes editorial.
Yeah, you're also a responsible podcaster.
Mm-hmm. Who
Okay,
prepares
so the
properly
reason
for
the way that this whole podcast got started is because I ordered EndNotes 5 around the time that it came out. It says that it was published in August 2019, but it wasn't made available until like a significant amount of time later. At least it was in 2020 that I eventually got around to ordering it, and I ordered, issues 2 through 4 at the same time. And yeah, I've told the story before, but whatever. um at the same time, I mean, when they sent it out to me, they accidentally sent duplicates of each copy. So I got 2 sets of EndNotes issue 2 through 5. And at the time, we were kind of thinking about collaborating on some kind of projects based around like reading and whatnot. So it just kind of seems like a like fate that we should, start an EndNotes podcast where we read through the entire EndNotes corpus and discussed each episode. I mean, each essay, because we had the entire EndNotes corpus minus issue 1, of course. And now you're not even in possession of EndNotes 5. This all started
Mm.
because we had physical copies of all of the books, but you can't even be
Luckily,
bothered to walk to the
luckily
East
the
End to get EndNotes 5. All you have to do is pick
Endnotes,
it up.
being the generous egalitarian socialists that they are, have provided digital
Oh,
PDF
yes.
copies of their entire corpus. Unfortunately, I did not realize until the day of the podcast recording that the EndNotes 5 PDF does not contain the editorial. So I realized that this piece I was to read for this episode was not available to me in digital format.
So I wonder what you thought I was talking about when I said read the editorial.
Yeah, I was like, does he mean this like 45 page like
The first
piece that
essay,
yeah, the first proper essay?
We
Because that's
Unhappy
a pretty
Few. It's
beefy,
almost 100
yeah.
pages. It's over 100 pages.
Sweet Jesus, that's a lot. That's
Yeah, I
like,
know. This one, all the
did
essays are
Karl
long as
Marx
hell.
write that or what? Like,
No, it's
is
credited
half
to
of it just
Endnotes.
angry footnotes?
The interesting thing about this edition is that the majority of the essays are actually intakes. They're credited to people. And it's only the first 2, We Unhappy Few and Error, which are, uncredited and which are therefore written by the Endnotes Collective proper. Whereas the rest of them, you have, Contours of the World Commune by Friends of the Classes Society, which, as we discussed in the last episode, are a group of it's like a Berlin-based kind of equivalent to Endnotes, a bunch of
Hmm.
communizers writing together. Then you have
Nah.
Revolutionary Motives by Mr. Jasper Burns. Then you have a selection from a bunch of I don't know, classic. I don't really know what the deal is with these people, like the yellow pages section of the book, but it's called The Passions of Communism, is kind of like the dossier title. And then it's Jacques Camat, Giorgio Cicerano, Gianni Carcia, and Marissa Fumano. So a bunch of Italians and also Jacques Camat. Presumably they're like classic kind of like communizers or like communists or something. And then we have Life Against Nature by Martin Bjork and To Abolish the Family by Emmy O'Brien. And then finally, short little piece by Jean Netton called Notes from the Chemo Room.
Hmm.
So that is that.
Well, what
How many
about
is that here? 9 selections, 9 episodes of the podcast. In 9 weeks, we will be
completed?
done. Footnotes to Endnotes will be done forevermore.
We'll be rebranding to footnotes to Trump tweets, where each
Footnotes to
episode
Trump
will review a
tweets.
different Donald Trump tweet,
Yes.
which is going to be difficult because we're going to have to get them off of like archival websites.
Yeah, for
Because,
the Internet Archive, or also off of I don't know, NFT auction zone. I'm sure a lot of his tweets are being auctioned off as NFTs. That's what I
he
would
could
do.
probably like fund his next presidential campaign just like NFT tweeting.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
you know,
true. Apparently, he's building
auction.
his own social network.
I've heard about this, which is like, I imagine it'll probably be successful because he's got like a lot of supporters who are also like distrustful of like existing social media.
It's not.
Um,
It's not going to be satisfying for anybody involved because he won't have. It'll just be full of like the same people, like the people who are already on the same page, and he won't be able to
yeah,
like trigger the libs, which is what really gave him pleasure, I think, in tweeting.
that's
Is
like,
like
I
reaching the
mean,
masses.
there is like a broader like reflection on like the contemporary nature of like American democracy, at least, where it's like if you go on any major, I think Twitter is like the best example because it's the most like the public square kind of deal. Like you don't really see people with different viewpoints engaging in discussion, like very rarely. Like the only time you really see that happening is if it happens to be like two mega nerds who are like so deep in it that like they're able to like respect each other as nerds even if they
Yeah,
disagree.
it's
But like
honestly the most cringe style of
yeah, it's like
tweeting.
usually
Oh
they just
yes,
forget about
you're
like
right. Thank
whatever it
you.
is. Like they don't even like, like the only reason they're able to agree is because they actually don't care that much about the issue. They just want to like talk about books and shit. But like the average person on Twitter, like they have no interest in actually convincing the other side. They just want to like do good optics for their own side by like dunking on like the opponent, which is like not an invalid like method. Like, because I guess like when you're in a debate, often it's not so much about convincing the opponent as like looking better than your opponent to all of the undecided people in the audience, right? Like, especially like young people, you want to look like cool to like teenagers so that when they're adults, they'll like, they'll carry on your cause. But like, it is when you really step back from it, it's kind of depressing. It's like, or it's not depressing, but it kind of invalidates like this idea of like the rational Renaissance, like liberal who's like wants to like really like articulate like a firm logical point. You realize like that's never really the case, even in like presidential debates. It's more about just like scoring style points.
Yeah, presidential debates are the biggest example of that. They're so far removed from actual like argumentation and kind of like logic and rhetoric and like they're not even like tied to needing to like tell the truth or like fairly represent reality. They just like spin utter bullshit in order to I don't know, like come out as better compared to the other guy in the eyes of everybody's watching. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like so far removed from the
Which
realities
is,
of debating.
but like that's another thing too, is like I guess when you're in a system where like everybody gets a vote, everyone gets a say in like these decisions, like the reality is that running like a major civilization, like let's say the United States, like a country of hundreds of millions of people, that's a vast like geographical area with like many international interests of different sorts, like that's super complex, and like the only people who actually know like how the minutia of like how that functions are like again like super think tank nerds and like people who've been working on this stuff their whole life. The average person does not have an understanding of any of this shit, and yet they have like a say in how it should go down. So like a presidential debate is just like this farce where you basically take this very complex process, which is like running a nation, and you make it seem like something that like any random suburbanite who has like maybe no political education whatsoever can like perfectly grasp. Like you don't want to suggest that like the average person might be a bit out of their like a bit out of their wheelhouse when it comes to politics. You want to make it seem like no, you're an informed expert and your vote counts and like your vote's important.
Well, I think that like any kind of technology or like science, statecraft can be bent to any like given political will. Like politics comes first, and then all the kind of like technocracy behind it, behind statecraft, like economics and policy making and all that kind of shit that follows from a political will. So just like in the hard sciences or whatever, or like the kind of like instrumental sciences, like the will to invent some kind of uh, product, a commodity that you can like generate profit off of is what directs like scientific energies and research energies. Like the reason that there's so many different types of like female contraception versus no male contraception is because there's no will behind it. It's not because it's impossible or difficult. It could be easily done, but there's no will to do so because of the
Mm.
entire culture. So just like I think it's like kind of I don't know. I don't think it's totally true to say that like running an economy or running a country is like so complicated, and it should be like kind of like I don't know, like disguised from the masses or whatever. Like the political like process is something that the masses have to be involved in, and they have to the idea is that they're voting for somebody who represents like a particular political vision and who can then bend the state to that vision. So like Trump can go in some kind of like I don't know, kind of like nationalistic route, or like Bernie Sanders could go in some kind of like socialistic route. All they have to do is like first gain sufficient political power to bend the technocrats. Like Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump don't need to, or like the people voting for them don't need to have like concrete ideas about the kind of policies that need to be instituted in order to like get universal health care or something in the United States.
Mm.
But they need to vote for the person who wants to make that happen, and then when that person becomes elected, then they direct the energies of the state crafters, the policy makers, to that end, and they have to figure it out, and it can be figured out. Like they just have to I don't know, take the money from here and put it over there, just like Canada
Yeah.
was able to basically give a universal basic income to most of the population for a significant period of time. I mean, it's just a matter of political will. Like the fucking resources are always there. They can do anything they want. The resources are unimaginable. That's my view.
Yeah, I guess that's like the part where I'd say, okay, that's where like the complication aspect comes out. It's not so much that like, it's like this heavily stratified machinery where it's like, oh, well, we basically got to keep doing things the same way. Like, I do agree that like there can be this popular will towards some sort of like abstract irrational vision, like just like this idea of like what could be. And like, if you have enough genuine energy moving in that direction, like it doesn't matter if there's like no plan, like society will shift and find a way, whether it succeeds or fails, to like at least attempt to manifest like that in terms of actual policy. But like where the complication aspect comes out is because the social machinery of like modern civilization has gotten so like large scale and complex, and like everything's divided over like these like massive like corporate like institutions made up of hundreds or thousands of people, each specializing on like a very particular aspect. You can end up in these situations like you just described, where like in Canada, we've had basically UBI for a year, and like I've heard like a lot of like even like economically minded people being like, yeah, we don't really know how that works, but it seems to be working. Like we're able to just do that. Like things that like for your whole life growing up, you're told like, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that. The country would fall apart. And then suddenly one day it's like, oh, actually we could do that. We don't really know how it's working, but it seems to be working. It's all held together by like balsa wood and duct tape.
All right. So the format of this episode, if you haven't guessed it, we don't really have much to talk about because
Mm-hmm.
Owen did not do the assigned reading. He didn't do his homework. And the assigned reading to begin with, there's not a lot going on there. It's basically just Endnotes, their editorial. There's 5 years between Endnotes 4, which we finished was like a month ago or something,
Yeah.
and Endnotes 5, which came out in 2019. So they kind of just like reflect on the years that separate the two publications, and what kind of happened in the interim. There's like and they kind of like blow their own horn a little bit, toot their own horn, and talk about how kind of like accurate all of their reflections were, which I think is like honestly pretty fair. um, um, and they kind of just like talk about what is going to happen in NS5, like what the essays are about and all of that sort of thing. So really
So
pretty unremarkable. What's that?
what what year did Endnotes 5 come out again?
It came out in August 2019 is what it says on the
Okay,
thing, and
so
then I ordered
this
it
is
in 2020.
an interesting time because like even though that was just like a year and a half ago, like maybe a little bit more, like it feels like a very distinctly different era. Like
Yeah, we've had many
Donald
like
Trump was
paradigm
president.
shifts.
Like we were 3 years into the Trump presidency, so like that was like maybe like the chillest point in that presidency, because like when he first got elected, it was like, oh shit, what's going to happen? Is he going to be like this totalitarian dictator? Like, is he actually going to make good on all that crazy shit he was saying during the campaign? After 3 years, there was like maybe this feeling like, okay, it's basically just another president. It's just like continuity of like the deep state infrastructure, basically. Just that Donald Trump's like on the throne. And like it was before coronavirus. So that's like the important part, because that was like the major game changer. So I'm like trying to remember back to like what 2019 actually looks like geopolitically, and it's like this blank space in my mind, because I feel like 2015 2016 was a big era because like that presidential campaign was like pretty hot, pretty spicy. It was pretty wacky for those of you who are like over the age of 4 and remember it. I'm sure you like can remember all of that craziness. And then 2020 was such like a massive like, oh, everything that happened before doesn't really matter anymore kind of situation. And now 2021 is like, it started off with a bang, but like it seems it's a little bit more stable currently. But yeah, when I think about 2019, I can't even really remember what it was like geopolitically. I remember my own life, but what do you remember about
Um,
2019?
I feel like the Bernie Sanders campaign had a lot of optimism behind it, and there was a lot of energy there, and a lot of people, in the United States, feeling hopeful about the possibility of him getting elected. Um, yeah, I don't know what else. Whatever. I know that in Canada, there's not a lot going on. There's never really that much going on.
Not much.
But all right, so we're not going to talk about the introduction too much because there's not a lot to talk about. But what we are going to do is do another state of the pod address, which is kind of what
Mm-hmm.
we tried to do the last time we had one of these episodes, at the beginning of Endnotes 4. I think that is when we opened up the Patreon and kind of like introduced
Yeah,
that. Um,
back around the start of the year, I guess it was.
yeah, around that, maybe a bit sooner. No, I think it was the start of the year because I remember we wanted to run out the year with kind of bonus episodes.
Yeah.
So what is happening? We have, what did I say, 8 weeks, 9 weeks before we finish this limited series, and we're going to keep going. We're going to continue recording the podcast, but we're going to be rebranding. We're going to be changing the format of the show to something a bit easier for us to record. It'll give us space to record more bonus episodes, which will be locked forever behind a paywall, and you'll only be able to access them if you give us money. But basically, we're going to be recording like topic episodes. We're going to choose a topic, and then we're going to discuss it. Um, how we arrive at those topics is TBD. We'll discuss it behind the scenes. I mean, I'm sure Owen will have things that he wants to discuss that I will know less about, and I will be in the role of kind of like an interlocutor and asking questions in the place of the audience or whatnot. And I'm sure the reverse will be true for me. So I will be giving the presentation. Owen will be passively receiving my wisdom. Um, and there's always the possibility of us discussing audience, um, taking audience suggestions. You can always get on our Discord and suggest something to us if you want. um, but yeah, what are have you I know there are a few things that I want to discuss. I want to talk about movies more often, so I'm going to be giving you some assigned viewings because I know that you know nothing about
This would
film.
be good because like out of all the art forms, and I'm including film and television as like one thing, like that's
You shouldn't,
probably
but you should
aside
not be
from
doing.
like
That's wrong. That's an
aside
indication of
from
how little you know about cinema.
maybe like sculpture I know less about, but like yeah, basically like I have like ADHD that's like opposite of most people's, or like most people I think like they could watch, they could watch like a Netflix program, but like if they wanted to like read a book or something, like it'd be really boring. Where for me, like the fact that like a book you kind of got to like focus your eyes at the page, it's like I don't know, it makes me like more actively like present with it. So I find reading books really easy, but like even if it's like a really good TV show or a movie or something, if I'm really enjoying it, I still find after like 5 minutes, if I'm like watching it on my computer, I'll be like opening up my emails or something to like, and I'll have the movie running in the background, and I'll like catch myself doing that, and I'll feel really bad because like yeah, I'm sure like David Lynch or whoever put a lot of work into like cinematography, and he'd be really upset if he knew I was watching it at like 320 pixels wide on like the
Yeah.
secondary tab on my netbook.
Yeah. I don't know how this is gonna work. You have a fucking netbook. How big is the screen on your netbook?
It's 1024 pixels by 600 pixels.
Jesus Christ.
It's about the size, and it's from like 2009, I think. Like
Oh my god.
Obama had just been elected. Remember when Obama was elected? How happy everybody
Yeah.
was.
Maybe we'll put that on the back burner for a bit, until we get you. You could just buy a monitor that you could connect to your
That's
computer
true.
and
Like a
then
big
play
ass.
the movie on it.
I could get like a
Or you could just buy a
TV.
television. They're really
Yeah.
cheap. Anyway,
That,
you also need a new computer. Folks, contribute
yeah.
to the Patreon. We need to buy Owen
Nope.
some
Owen.
some commodities. Anyway, so that's one thing that I'd like to do. One idea that I had is like select a few movies that are either by the same director or in some way related to each other, and then discuss them. Because I like film, I study film, so I'd like to talk about it. Another thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to continue reading essays and books and whatnot and talking about them. But yeah, as I said, those will be locked behind a paywall. Those are not going to that I definitively know those will be the things that are not released for free. probably all of our like topic um, kind of episodes will be put out for free, but yeah, if you want to get like a summary or an analysis of I don't know, like Mark Fisher's exiting the vampire castle, or Joseph Schumpeter's what is it, socialism, capitalism,
I'm
and
200 pages into
democracy.
this book and I forget the title. Like I've been reading this book all week. This is my current one of the several books that I'm reading right now. Is Mr. Joseph Schumpeter. I've been saying his name Joseph Schumpeter, which I think sounds kind of better, but yeah, I'm reading his I don't know if it's his most famous book. It's the first one I've read by him, but like Capitalism, Socialism, and one other ism.
Right.
I
So
don't
if you
think
want
it's
to
bad for
hear
you.
Owen kind of summarize that book, then you'll have to pay $5 a month for that privilege. Additionally, I am always kind of like wanting to have more guests on the show. It's a bit difficult to do just because like reading for the show, reading for my own life, and then like the rest of my life, it's a lot of stuff to do. And then like preparing for a guest interview is also a lot of stuff to do. It's really, and Owen is not helping with that. He helps with the editing. I mean, he does the editing, but so far he has not helped with any of the few interviews that we've had, which is fine. It's been my initiative, but yeah, it's like a lot to do. Usually I am mostly interested in having people who have like written something or have like some thing that we can actually like discuss, rather than just like having like a personality or something and like having a chit chat. I'm more interested in having somebody who has like published ideas on some topic or other, and which I can then discuss with them. But that means like reading or like figuring out what their views are, and then coming up with like an outline for that. Which is a lot of work combined with other stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, hopefully if we move to this format where we'll be having like more open-ended conversations, then that will free up more time for me to um, focus on
I've
getting
just got an
guests for the
idea.
show. What's that?
I just had an idea for interviews that we could do. Okay, so you know how like there's like these like AI chatbots now, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I don't know if you've seen this, but like you can go online, you're talking to like an artificial intelligence, but it's like acting like it's a person. And some of them you can actually program in what kind of person it is, right? So like I'm assuming you could like create like an AI Karl Marx and conduct an interview with AI Karl Marx. I feel like technology has gotten to the point where like we could do something like this.
I mean, I was thinking that you would say conduct an interview or have the interview be conducted by AI Karl Marx. So AI Karl Marx would come up with all the questions, and then I would just repeat them. That would be better, I think.
It would be an interesting, like, actually, this is a real question. It's like, are there AI generated podcasts now? Like, I'm feel like this will be a thing soon because, like, you're listening to the podcast and it's just like voices talking. And I know there are voice synthesizers now. Like, there's some very convincing. Like, you can listen to like the Notorious B.I.G. reading like H.P. Lovecraft in the form of a rap, and it's like sounds actually like him. Um, and like I'm assuming most people, including myself, when we're listening to podcasts, we're not paying very close attention. You're probably doing some other things in other tabs. Close those other tabs you have open right now. That's disgusting. Why do you think I want you looking at that while I'm talking to you? That's terrible. Um, but people usually aren't paying close attention to what's actually being said in a podcast. It's just like extra dopamine. Like, we're kind of at the point of dopamine depletion where we need 5 or 6 forms of stimuli going at any given time, and like podcasts are usually one of them. So you could have a fully AI generated podcast, and as long as it's not spouting total nonsense, as long as there's some grammatical coherence to it, and it is putting words in an order that somewhat resembles actual discourse, that's enough. Like, I mean, I go on the internet all the time and I listen to all sorts of content, and I'm like, this could probably just be robot generated. Like, I don't feel like there's necessarily like a human will behind this. I'm just
Yeah, I
spitballing some
mean, I
ideas.
don't know who is going to actually listen to that, but I have this is somewhat related phenomenon, is that people will take books that are in the public domain and then like put them for sale on Amazon. It's like a print on demand kind of thing, just hoping to like snare I don't know, people who are dumb or something. Like you search for like I don't know, the War of the Worlds or something that is in the public domain on Amazon, and then without realizing that it's actually in the public domain, and you could still buy like a nice Penguin edition of it or something, but you could also potentially pay for like some like shitty like print on demand kind of thing, or even like a like self-published ebook or something. This is something that people do. It's pretty kind of nefarious
Yeah, which is like,
loophole.
I mean, this is more of an aside, but
This is all an aside.
like as someone who makes music, like I don't know if I've expressed it on the show before, but I'm like one of my least favorite like neologisms of the last decade
Jism.
is like neologisms is content creator, hashtag content creator in like as like a replacement for artist, because it really to me articulates kind of like the position that like art, or at least like popular art, is in the contemporary landscape, where like basically everything is available online. Like if you go on the internet, there is no, I mean, like there's a few things that are still like actually illegal that you couldn't get, but you could probably even find those things if you knew where to look. But generally speaking, there is like no dictation upon like taste or skill or like whether or not something will even sell. Like literally anyone can put any random bullshit they want online. And in fact, they do. So on the one hand, theoretically, like that's interesting because like, and I mean, it certainly is because you can go on like SoundCloud or something and you'll find every sort of music that you could imagine. You can find like all of this really novel and interesting and sometimes very well produced material, but there's just so much of it, and it's infinitely expanding that it does something psychologically to the human being. Where even if it's like all worthy efforts, and certainly it's not by any metric, a lot of it is just straight up garbage that could have been made by robots. Like just the sheer mass of it makes one value it less. It's kind of like if you had like if you went into a room and there was like one hamster walking around, like it'd be cute. It's like, oh look, a little hamster. If you open the door to a room and there's like 5,000 hamsters in there, that's terrifying. That's disgusting. Like when there's a lot of one thing, it's not fun. And I think that's what happens to art. It's like a bunch of hamsters that reproduce too much, and now there's just like a general deluge of it. And this is what the internet is. It's a big hamster fuck pile of aborted content. I forget how I
Disgusting.
got on that topic.
That's an apt description for this podcast. The big hamster pile, big hamster fuck pile of aborted content. It's basically, I mean, I don't know. We are that. We are like some small podcast that I don't think anybody really listens to. I honestly have no idea if anybody listens to this show. I really don't. Haven't taken the time. That's another thing that I hope to do by the time we rebrand is actually like develop a proper website for us and get us on iTunes and Spotify and whatnot. So our discoverability goes up. If we start having guests, then those guests will bring in their own followers, and people search for guests on platforms, not us. Nobody's
This is
searching for
true.
us. They're going to be searching for
No,
guests, and
like
hopefully,
honestly,
yeah.
I mean, this has kind of become a big thing. Like, I think this is like really come into its own in 2020 because so many people have been like forced to like move their social lives to the digital realm, at least temporarily. I think like there's been a real like podcasts were taking off before because people saw how big shit like Joe Rogan got and like they were like, I want in on that. But I think like this last year, it's kind of gotten distinctly different where you're seeing a lot of these like basically like reading groups and discussion podcasts, like similar to what we've been doing, where like there's not really like a lot of like fancy like production values or anything. It's not like entertainment. It's more just like, oh, this could have been someone's like private discussion about a book, but they chose to put it online so that maybe other people could get some value from it. And there are a lot of people doing that. And like I get value out of that. Like sometimes when I'm reading like a book or an essay, like I'll actually go online and just go on YouTube and search for the title of that. And I might find somebody's video that only has like, I don't know, like 10, 50, 100 views and no comments. And it's just like them talking about the book for 40 minutes. And it's like probably never going to take off because it's like relatively like esoteric and just like kind of like very low production values. They basically just record themselves talking and put it online. But like I listen to it and I get something out of it because I've just read that book and it's like kind of like an analog for like being able to discuss that book with an actual person. Like it's, you know, it's not a totally perfect like capture of that experience, but it like gives me some sense of value. So I think like, you know, and I'm assuming like some of the, if there are people listening, maybe they're in the same boat, like maybe they're also recording material like this. Like I doubt that it's ever gonna get like Joe Rogan big, but probably someone on the internet will hear it and get some sort of actual human experience from it.
Some kind of human experience. Yeah, we're basically filling in the parasocial void in everybody's life. Isn't that sad? Well, whatever. I think that if we, move to discussing topics, we'll be able to get some interesting conversations out of them, like like just because we both have interesting perspectives that are not like particularly represented in popular discourse on the internet
Mm.
or in the mainstream or on the underground. Like I think that we both have like bit of an outsider perspective on most things. So if we move to discussing topics, then I think that they will be interesting in their own right. And yeah, I mean, I think that whatever. I don't want to get into it. But do you have any topics that you would like to discuss? Any kind of
Ooh.
essays or particular topics that you think that we would have a good time talking about? I was thinking that
Um,
one topic that we should discuss is Nietzsche, and
yeah,
just kind of like
that
have a
would be
general conversation about him. Obviously, the question is Nietzsche, woke or broke?
woke or broke or bespoke.
Or bespoke.
Um, Yeah, because I mean we've mentioned Nietzsche on this podcast. We've never really talked at length about Nietzsche, but I know that like Nietzsche's writings were like super influential on both of us at a young age. And like I guess that's a pretty typical like first philosopher because he's not even like necessarily like the philosopher you'd want to like start reading first if you wanted to learn philosophy proper, but like he's very good at writing in a way that like inspires like a young person. Like he has this like very adventurous kind of like way of writing, especially if you've grown up in like Western society in like the 20th century or the 19th century, whatever. Like he has this way of making you recognize like aspects of your own thinking that like probably you had taken for granted as being like default objective, like, you know, like just eternal like truths of the human experience, and he makes you recognize that they are like very subjective and contingent on like the particular conditions of like where we are in like society, like, you know, people from like West European cultures and like post Christian cultures and like post Enlightenment cultures, and like how all of this comes together to create a very particular world perspective. So yeah, all that to say, like I was super into Nietzsche in like my late teens, early 20s. I've not even read all of his books though. I've read like several of them. So at a certain point, I would like to go back and like really revisit Nietzsche, because now that I actually am somewhat familiar with like philosophy proper, I'd be able to like interact with him as a philosopher rather than just as like kind of a poet. I guess that's how a lot of people read him.
Right. I mean, I have come around to having a critical perspective on him, and yeah, I'm largely kind of convinced that he is more or less bad. That's my opinion at this point. I think the kind of like general consensus is moving more and more to that end, at least within the left. There's that huge book that came out recently. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called like Nietzsche, the Aristocratic Rebel, or something. It's written by somebody named Dominic Losardo. Losurdo.
I have
It's
not
like a
heard of that
thousand
book.
page book. It was just published like this year or
Holy
something.
shit.
And it's kind of like a reconstruction of his philosophy in the context of when he was writing it.
Mm.
And yeah, its whole argument is that he was definitively a reactionary thinker. I only read a review of it, but it seemed pretty convincing. And yeah, anyway, so that's one topic that I think that we could have a fun time discussing. Um, what else? I was thinking. I know that the first reading assignment, because we're becoming, when we rebrand, we're going to be no longer tied excuse me, to the specific format that we've been locked into, which is communization theory. Um, so I know that the first essay that I'm going to insist that we read is Soul and Form by George Lukács, which
Ooh,
is also going to be the name of the podcast going forward.
very nice.
That's right. It's going to be called Soul and Form. I will be form and you will be soul. I guess that's how it's going to work. But yeah, that's a essay I have not read yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Any other topics that you think we could have a good time
Damn,
discussing?
I think yeah, because we have had this very like narrow focus on communization, which I think has been useful because communization is a very like contemporary sort of like discourse. Like it's all the writings we've read have been largely from like the last decade, at least the particular like subset of communization. I guess like the term has been in use much longer than that, but like all of the material we focused on is like post 2000. Um, I am personally curious to do like a mix of like older material like Lukács, but also like get a better sense of like what the contemporary like ideological positions and discourses are like, because I think like these sorts of things can get overlooked as you're like living through a period of history. Like, it's like, what's that David Foster Wallace quote about like a fish in water doesn't really like know what water is because like it's just totally immersed in it. And I think that's like largely the case with like whatever contemporary like political or social situation you're in. It is like just a general interest of mine to like want to have a better understanding and a better like formal articulation of like the various ideological viewpoints and projects that are going on, like because you certainly encounter them when you like go on the internet or even like have real life discussions with people, but you don't always necessarily recognize them as something distinct. Like I think it's an oversimplification to reduce everything down to either being like right wing, left wing, or like boomer liberal centrist. Like I think like every position is much more nuanced and multifaceted than that, and it's like useful whether you want to like signal boost it or critique it to have like a very like nuanced view of like what it's trying to do, what it's trying to articulate, and like what its like historical impetus is. So that's something that I'm doing personally that I think could be fun to discuss, is to like try to figure out like, okay, well, communization is like this one kind of movement that's happened over the last 10 years. Like, what are other formal named like ideological subsets and like, philosophical tendencies that get tossed around?
It's not really an answer to my question of whether you can think of any like specific topics that we should discuss. Topics like Nietzsche, or another thing I was thinking about is we could talk about podcasting, because you seem to think about it quite a lot, about content creation.
This is
And
true.
yeah, I feel like you have more thoughts on it and talk about it more than I do, even though I am, I guess, more technically a content creator than you are. Like, you make
Yeah,
music, which
we could
has its own
even
history. I work specifically within this like new media thing that is like inextricably bound up with this idea of content creation.
it's true that
Um,
I do think a lot about hashtag content. Like, I've almost thought it'd be fun to write like an essay that's kind of like a modernization of like Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Do it like The Work of Art in the Age of Digital Proliferation or something like that. Like, I'm sure someone's already done like a title like that, but like I do reflect a lot on like what it means more broadly, like what the internet signifies, like philosophically, practically, politically, for art and information, like this great like amalgamating transforming force that is still very much in its infancy. Like, we've had the internet for maybe what, like 25, 26 years or so, and it feels like it's like pervaded every aspect of culture, but like I get the sense that it's still very much in the initial stages. And like I see the internet over time completely transforming not just human culture, but like human consciousness itself, like the understanding of the individual and society and all of that. So I would like to like dive more formally into like examining that, like even if it's just on the micro scale of like the contemporary moment of things like podcasting and Spotify and like digital media platforms and NFTs and all of these like current emergent phenomenon, and like try to like discern what sort of transformation is happening there, like what is being moved away from and what is being moved towards, and like what it signifies. So yeah, it's definitely like a big interest of mine.
all right, so I guess I'm putting you on the spot here by asking you to come up with a topic, but moving on from that, do you have anything else to discuss for this episode?
Hmm.
So
Well,
we're going to be discussing the first essay of Endnotes Volume 5 next week. In case you missed it, we are going to be rebranding in approximately 9 weeks to a more discussion, open format kind of show where we, choose a topic for an episode and then kind of like, talk about it, bringing whatever background knowledge and perspective your two co-hosts here have to bear on the, topic of the week. We're going to continue to discuss essays, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 a month or something, maybe 4. Maybe we'll do a bonus episode every week. Who knows? But those are going to be locked behind a paywall on our Patreon. And I'm also going to be trying to get more guests on the show. Um, the new show will be called Soul and Form, named after the George Lukács essay that we'll be discussing. And you can get involved. You can suggest a topic for us to discuss. You can, I don't know, read along with us. You can suggest a reading material for us. You can suggest a guest for us. You can join any one of the book clubs that we have ongoing by getting in on our Discord. You get the link to our Discord by supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/the inverted form. Support us at $5 a month. You'll get access to the bonus episodes. You'll get access to the Discord as well. Or you can also just send me a DM on any platform. But yeah, I mean, do you have anything else that we should talk about?
hmm, nothing super pertinent.
No, this is a bit of a unfocused episode. Hopefully our conversation episodes we will get better. This is episode like what 31 or something. I'm sure by
Something
episode
like that.
100 we'll have it down.
Yeah, yeah, the
Will be
formula will
much
be
more
perfected.
compelling.
I mean,
Will
this
be
is
much
what
more compelling host.
is supposed to happen in industrial society. Is like everything's just like this self-perfecting like process that automatically like develops towards like the most efficient articulation of like an idea.
Well, industrialism did not invent practice makes perfect.
But they perfected it.
Let's see. Right. I guess so. In a way. All right. Go to patreon.com/the inverted form. Give us $3 a month to get access to the Discord. Give us $5 a month to get access to the Discord and also access to the bonus episodes. Give
If you
us
give
$10 a
us
month for all of that, plus, our goodwill. All right. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
bye everyone.